There's a kind of tiredness no amount of sleep can fix, a heaviness you can't name but it follows you everywhere. Have you ever felt that you wake up, not because you're excited for the day, but because staying in bed any longer would make the guilt worse? It's not that you don't want to live, it's just living feels too heavy. Not because you're broken, but because somewhere along the way, you became too full of things that were never yours to carry. There are people who come into this world with a door left open, between the seen and the unseen. They don't just feel, they receive. They don't just hurt, they absorb. They notice everything. The sigh behind a smile, the pause before someone says, "I'm fine." The way the energy in a room changes when a certain person walks in, and they carry it even when no one asks them to. If this sounds like you, I need to tell you something no one probably ever said to you clearly. You are not just emotionally tired, you are spiritually worn out. This isn't ordinary exhaustion. It's not because you stayed up too late. It's not because you worked too hard. It's because you've been feeling too much for too long, without protection, without language, without permission. Carl Jung once warned, the unconscious does not differentiate between your pain and the world's pain. And that is the hidden danger of being sensitive in a world that is emotionally numb. You are porous, which means the sadness in your chest might not even be yours. The fear in your gut might belong to the entire room you just entered. The hopelessness you can't explain could be echoing from a mother, a father, a culture that never grieved what it lost. But here's the problem. Because no one told you this, you started thinking you were the problem, that your sensitivity was too much, that your tears were embarrassing, that your empathy made you weak. And so you began to hide. You started wearing the mask. You forced yourself to be normal, to blend in, to numb it all just to function. But the soul doesn't forget how to feel. It waits. It breathes beneath the silence. And eventually, it begins to ache. If you've ever looked around and wondered, why am I so tired even when nothing's wrong? If you've ever felt like you're carrying weight that can't be named, I want you to hear this. You're not too sensitive. You're not dramatic. You're not too much. You're simply too close to the veil. And the weight you're feeling is not madness, it's a message, a signal, a door. If the world moves too fast for your heart to keep up, leave a comment, even just a quiet word. It helps more than you think, not just for you, but for someone who's been waiting to feel seen. Because there's something you need to hear next, something Jung never shouted, but left behind like breadcrumbs in his work. A hidden warning for people just like you. You were never too sensitive. You were just never protected. Some people are born as if their bodies were made of glass threads, clear, fragile, but able to carry light in ways nothing else can. You touch them once and they remember it for years. You speak a single sentence and they hear 10 meanings beneath your words. You fall silent and they still hear the noise inside your silence. This isn't weakness. This is a kind of reception, pure and rare, a soul wired directly into the nervous system of the world. Carl Jung once said, highly sensitive people don't just feel what others feel, they feel what others suppress. They don't just sense sadness, they soak it in. They don't just hear hurt, they hold it, without realizing they're doing it. And in a world that rewards armor, that worships efficiency, numbness, and control, this kind of sensitivity becomes dangerous, because no one teaches you how to hold pain consciously. The world only teaches how to suppress it, to keep moving, to pretend nothing happened, to smile. But the sensitive soul can't pretend. They feel, even when they don't want to. Have you ever walked into a room and felt overwhelmed for no reason? Have you ever talked with someone and left feeling heavy, drained, or confused, even if they smiled the whole time? Have you ever sensed something dark moving through you? When your life looked fine, that's not in your head. That's not weakness. That's the gift of sensitivity, but turned inward, unfiltered and unguarded. You are what Jung called a receptive vessel, an open antenna tuned to the frequency of the collective unconscious. And unless you learn how to filter, you begin to carry everything, even the things that were never yours. The unconscious doesn't say, "This pain belongs to someone else." It only says, "Here is what must be felt." Carl Jung. And so you feel everything. You don't know why you're tired, why your chest is heavy, why your mornings start with dread, even when life seems okay. All you know is this: something is moving inside you, and it won't stop. This is why sensitive people often feel like outsiders, not because they don't belong, but because they exist on a frequency that most people can't hear. The world sees the event. They feel the emotional field behind it. The world hears the words. They feel the fear beneath the words. The world watches behavior. They sense the energy behind the performance. But this also makes them vulnerable, because when emotion isn't named or understood, the sensitive person begins to believe it belongs to them. That sadness might be your mother's. That fear might be your father's. That hopelessness, the ache in your spine, might come from an entire generation that never cried its grief. But if no one teaches you this, you'll think you're broken. Have you done this to yourself? Blamed your exhaustion on some personal flaw? Told yourself you were too soft, too emotional, too weak? Tried to toughen up, tried to grow thicker skin? But your soul doesn't want armor. It just wants understanding. The sensitive soul doesn't need to shut down to survive. It needs to learn how to distinguish what is yours and what is not. Where do I end? Where does the other begin? And that's where healing begins. When you stop absorbing and start discerning. When you begin to ask, is this emotion truly mine? Am I feeling this or absorbing it? Is this my fear? Or something ancient moving through me? Jung once met a young man like this, someone who carried too much and didn't know why. He came trembling, hollow, lost. "I'm too sensitive," he said. "I can't function like this." But Jung didn't numb him, didn't try to shut off his emotions. He simply said, "You are not sick. You are a vessel." But no one taught you how to hold. And maybe that's you. You've been carrying what was never named, what was never explained, what was never yours. You don't need to become colder. You don't need to force a smile through your exhaustion. You need to learn how to hold yourself steady while the world moves through you, and to give back what isn't yours. You were never meant to carry everyone. You were meant to see them, to witness, to reflect. And that starts with one thing: awareness. You are not too sensitive. You are unfiltered. You are receptive without structure. And that kind of gift without grounding will eat you alive. You don't need to be stronger. You need to become clearer. The veil between you and the world has always been thin. But now, you're learning to recognize the signals for what they are. Not identity, but information. Not burden, but invitation. If you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, still breathing into this truth, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for the parts of you that need to stay awake for what's coming. Because the next step in your journey is not about surviving sensitivity. It's about descending into it and finding the power it's been hiding all along. Most people run from the darkness, but for the sensitive soul, it knocks. Every night, in every silence, in every dream. Have you felt this? You stop craving light that feels artificial. You no longer want to be positive all the time. You don't care to appear fine. Instead, you feel like something inside you is sinking. You don't know why. You can't name it, but you know. You're not the same. And somehow the surface world no longer feels like home. Carl Jung called this katabasis the descent into the underworld. Not failure, not collapse, but the soul's ancient rite of passage, a sacred spiral that those who feel too deeply must walk, so that they're not devoured by the very depth they were born to sense. Because if you don't descend consciously, the unconscious will drag you under, and it won't be gentle. It won't ask if you're ready. It won't wait for your life to settle down. It knows that what you've been absorbing from others, from culture, from silence, has reached its threshold. And someone must feel it. Someone must look. That someone is you. This journey doesn't begin in clarity. It begins in disorientation. You might start dreaming of strange symbols, endless staircases, flooded houses, broken doors, tunnels that lead nowhere, people without faces just staring at you. You wake up feeling shaken, unsettled, and the feeling doesn't leave you. This isn't random. This is your unconscious speaking. You begin to notice strange exhaustion, a tightness in the chest, a sense of dread you can't explain. The body feels heavy though the doctor says you're fine. The world becomes too loud, too shallow, too unreal, and you wonder what's happening to me. Let me say this carefully. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are not depressed. You may be experiencing what Jung called a spiritual emergency, a rupture in the unconscious that signals the beginning of transformation. It's not a breakdown, it's an initiation, but only if you stay with it, instead of numbing it. In this descent, emotions no longer play nice. You cry without knowing why. You withdraw from people not because you dislike them, but because your system can no longer pretend. You feel disgusted by superficiality. You lose interest in proving yourself. You crave truth, even if it's painful. But that, too, is part of the turning. Because only when the old masks crack can the self begin to surface. Jung wrote sensitivity that remains unconscious turns into suffering. But sensitivity that becomes conscious becomes vision. You don't need to fix your sensitivity. You need to descend into it with your eyes open. To let it take you into the parts of yourself you were never taught to love. Imagine your soul as a flame, but it's been surrounded by tears that were never cried, pain that was never spoken, grief that was never honored. The light didn't go out. It's just been waterlogged. And to find it again, you don't climb upward. You go downward, to where it all began. Not to conquer it, but to sit with it until it softens. This is why most highly sensitive people go through a dark night, a time when nothing makes sense, a time when they feel invisible, misunderstood, untethered. But that's not a mistake. It's the opening, the doorway back inward, back to what you buried, back to what your culture suppressed, back to what the ancestors forgot how to feel. You'll know you're in it when you stop trying to explain yourself. You stop needing to be seen by everyone. You start letting go of what you thought healing was supposed to look like. You stop searching for light on the outside, and you begin learning how to walk with the dark inside you. Jung called this phase individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, not who they were told to be. It often begins with loss, with silence, with confusion, but it ends with depth, with clarity, with real presence. And if you stay the course, you do not return as who you were. You emerge as who you are. If you're in the middle of this, if it feels like your soul is being dragged under by something you can't name, share this video, not to spread the darkness, but to break the silence. You never know who is walking this same path feeling like they're losing their mind when really they're answering a call. A quiet share might be the signal someone else is praying for. Jung never shouted this. He whispered it. He scattered it in dreams, in symbols in the spaces between his words. There's something strange that happens when you go deep enough into your sensitivity. You begin to realize the pain you're feeling might not even be yours. You feel a heaviness you can't explain. Nothing is technically wrong. Your life seems fine. And still, you wake up with sorrow in your chest. You walk through your day with a shadow on your back. You feel like you're carrying something, but no one else can see it. So you begin to think something is wrong with you. But what if it isn't? What if you're simply feeling what others refuse to feel? Carl Jung left behind a warning. It wasn't always direct, but it's there woven through the mythic images in his work. The more sensitive you are to the unconscious, the greater your risk of being devoured by it. Because the unconscious doesn't label what it offers you. It doesn't say, "This pain belongs to someone else. You can let it pass." No, it just says here, this is what the world has buried, and someone must feel it. That someone is often you. And if you don't know how to filter it, you begin to mistake collective pain for personal identity. You start thinking, why am I so sad? Why can't I shake this feeling? Maybe I'm broken, but what if the sadness belongs to your mother or your father or your entire culture, which never grieved what it lost? What if you're not depressed? What if you're simply sensitive to what everyone else has repressed? This is what Jung was trying to show us. He once worked with a 24-year-old man who came to him shaking, exhausted, and full of shame. "I'm too sensitive," he said. "I cry in churches. I cry next to trees that are dying. I can't function in the world. It's too much." But Jung didn't pathologize him. He didn't call him broken. Instead, he listened to his dreams. Dreams of angels feeding him soil, wolves licking wounds that weren't his, a city collapsing while he stood unharmed in its center. And Jung said something simple and unforgettable. "You are not sick. You are a vessel. But no one taught you how to hold." This is what so many sensitive souls never hear. You don't need to shut down your sensitivity. You need to become conscious of it. Because unconscious sensitivity becomes suffering, but conscious sensitivity becomes wisdom. And that wisdom begins with one sacred task: boundaries. Not walls to shut the world out, but structures that allow you to say, what is mine and what is not? What am I feeling and what am I absorbing? Where do I end? And where does the other begin? You were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to witness, to reflect, to mirror back the soul of the world. And you can't do that if you're drowning. This is why so many sensitive people get trapped in roles: the healer, the listener, the fixer, the peacemaker. These sound noble, but they are masks. They're personas, temporary identities meant to protect you, but they can't bear the full weight of your soul. Only the self can do that. Not the ego, not who you think you are, but who you actually are beneath all the coping, all the masks, all the inherited stories. And the self only arrives when the persona fails. That's why this descent into pain is not a mistake. It's a signal. It means the mask is cracking, and something deeper is asking to emerge. Something ancient, something sacred, something utterly you. You are not feeling too much. You are feeling what has long been forgotten. And in doing so, you are being asked to remember something. Something Jung understood well. You are not being destroyed. You are being initiated. If any of this has stirred something in you, if you've ever wondered why you feel like you're carrying more than your share, keep watching this video, because what comes next will show you how not to drown in this depth, but how to stand inside it with your heart awake. When everything you thought you were begins to fall apart, that's not the end. That's when the self begins. It always starts the same way. The role stops working. The smile becomes exhausting. The mask begins to slip, not because you're careless, but because your soul is tired of pretending. You were the reliable one, the strong one, the one who understood everyone else's feelings, except your own. You carried so much, but slowly, silently, something inside you began to whisper, "This isn't who I really am." And at first you resisted, because the persona you built helped you survive. But then one day, it doesn't. The persona is the mask you wear. The self is who you are when all masks fall away. And when the persona breaks, not by choice, but by life's insistence, you begin to sense something ancient waking up beneath the surface. Something quiet, something strong, something that doesn't need approval, because it remembers the truth. The shift is subtle at first. You start noticing things you used to ignore. You stop tolerating what once felt normal. You withdraw not out of fear, but because your soul is calling you inward. Your dreams begin to change. They no longer show chaos, confusion, or collapse. Instead, new symbols emerge. An old woman guiding you through a forest. A child pointing toward a door in a wall. A river flowing through a dried-out valley. An animal standing at the threshold of your home, watching silently. These are not random. These are signs that your unconscious no longer sees you as a passive receiver, but as an active participant. It is no longer chasing you with suffering. It is inviting you into initiation. This is the turning point, the place where people often get scared and try to go back. But you can't go back, because the version of you that wore the mask no longer fits. You feel the ache of not belonging, but also the subtle joy of not betraying yourself anymore. You start saying no. You start resting without guilt. You start protecting your inner world like it matters, because it does. And as this inner restructuring happens, you begin to feel something unusual, a sense of presence, a stillness, not always peaceful, but real. It's like, for the first time in your life, you're not performing, you're not calculating, you're just being. And in that being, there's clarity. You begin to see others more clearly too, not because you're judging, but because the fog of your own self-denial has lifted. You no longer absorb everything unconsciously. You begin to choose what you allow in. You begin to sense your edges. This is what Jung called individuation, not becoming someone new, but becoming who you were always meant to be, beneath the noise. And in this process, you realize something most people never do. Your sensitivity isn't a liability. It's precision, not a sponge for pain, but a finely tuned instrument for truth. You begin to see that your wounds didn't break you. They hollowed out the space where something sacred could finally enter. You are no longer leaking. You are holding. You are no longer absorbing. You are perceiving. You are no longer lost. You are becoming rooted. This is where healing deepens, not as a feeling of constant bliss, but as a capacity to stand still in your own soul while the world continues to move. You don't need to fix everything. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You only need to remain faithful to the truth that is becoming alive inside you. There is a kind of pain that doesn't ask for healing. It asks for witnessing, and not everyone is built for that. But you are. Once you begin to see, you can't unsee. Once you begin to feel beneath the surface loses its power over you. And this, my friend, is where a deeper archetype begins to stir, the wounded seer. Not just the sensitive, not just the empath, but the one who has felt too much, seen too far, and is now asked to carry the knowing, in a world that would rather not know. This archetype is ancient. You'll find it in myths, in old stories and dreams. The one who goes blind but begins to see inward. The one who walks with a limp because he's been to the underworld. The one who hears the cries of the unseen and cannot turn away. This is no longer about emotional sensitivity. It is about psychic responsibility, to witness, to name what others avoid, to hold the energy that no one else knows how to hold. It is not glamorous. It is not rewarded. You will not be understood. In fact, there will be times when your ability to feel makes you the target of others' projections. Because when you carry the gift of insight, people will try to silence you not because you're wrong, but because your presence reflects something they've buried. This is the shadow of the wounded seer, to be blamed for seeing what others pretend isn't there. You may begin to feel like you don't belong anywhere, like no space feels safe enough for your truth, like you're always carrying more than your share of reality. But this is not a sign of your failure. It's a sign of your initiation. The seer archetype awakens when the soul has been hollowed by experience and still chooses to stay awake. There is a loneliness here, a sacred kind, not because you're unloved, but because your lens has widened beyond what most people can tolerate. You see the wounds behind the words, the contradictions behind the smiles, the patterns repeating through generations, and perhaps worst of all, you dream of what's coming, long before it arrives. Dreams may become intense during this stage. You might dream of rooms you forgot existed now filled with light, an old tree whispering your name, strangers calling you by your real name, the one you haven't spoken aloud. A storm on the horizon and you're the only one preparing for it. These are not just dreams, they are communications. The unconscious is no longer chasing you, it's walking beside you. And as this relationship deepens, you begin to notice the world itself becoming symbolic. Every encounter feels layered, every word holds weight, every silence vibrates. You realize you're not just sensing emotions, you're tracking archetypal energy. You've crossed over from reactivity into reverence. The world will not congratulate you for this. You may still feel misunderstood, dismissed, or too much, but something inside you has changed forever. You no longer ask the world for permission to feel. You no longer outsource your worth. You no longer dilute your knowing for the comfort of others. Because you understand now, the seer's role is not to be believed. It is to bear witness. You are not here to convince. You are here to embody, to live with such truth and clarity that even your silence becomes a mirror, to walk through the world carrying the unseen not as a burden, but as a reminder that the soul still speaks in symbols, in dreams, in tremors beneath the surface, and that someone still listens. The final test is not awakening, it's staying awake. In a world that keeps asking you to fall back asleep, you've walked the descent, you've sat in silence, you've felt the pain that doesn't belong to just you, and learned how to hold it without losing yourself. But now comes the most delicate stage of all returning, re-entering the world, without abandoning the soul you just reclaimed. This is where many sensitives slip back into sleep, not because they're weak, but because the world is loud, fast, and addicted to illusion. And the pressure to perform again, to put the mask back on, to play nice, to simplify your truth, will feel overwhelming. But you didn't walk through fire just to wear the same face again. You are no longer that version of yourself. You've died and returned, initiated, reformed, awake. Now the real challenge is living from that place. You'll notice things you didn't before. You'll hear what people don't say. You'll feel when a room is out of alignment. You'll sense when you're being asked to betray yourself for the sake of comfort. But you'll also feel something new center. Not an idea, not an identity, but a living presence inside you, stable, quiet, grounded. This is the self. Not who you think you are, but who you remembered you've always been. And from that center, your sensitivity transforms into clarity. You no longer react to everything. You respond to what is real. You no longer carry everyone's pain. You reflect what they've forgotten. You no longer seek permission to exist. You embody truth. And here's the paradox. As you become whole, you may feel more alone, Because most of the world is still asleep, still chasing, still performing, still numbing. You'll look around and wonder, why does no one else feel this? Why does no one else see? But this time, you won't resent them. You'll remember, they are you, in a different moment. And just like you once needed a mirror, now you are that mirror. This is the gift of the conscious sensitive in a fractured world, not to fix everything, not to save everyone, but to live so fully rooted in their soul that their presence becomes a quiet invitation for others to remember theirs. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to convince. Your gaze, your stillness, your boundaries, they speak volumes. This is what it means to walk the symbolic life. This is what it means to serve. And if you've made it here to the end, then hear me clearly. You are not too much. You are what the world forgot it needed. You are the mirror. You are the myth. You are the medicine. If this spoke to something real inside you, leave a comment below. Not for engagement, but so others know they're not alone. Maybe share a moment when your own sensitivity felt like a burden or a breakthrough. Your story could become someone else's mirror. Share this video with someone who feels deeply but has no language for what they carry. They may not say it, but they're waiting to be seen. And if you want to keep walking this path, subscribe, not to follow me, but to stay connected to your own unfolding. This isn't just a channel. It's a reflection space for souls who feel the world more than it seems. This is not the end. This is the threshold. From here, you don't go back. You go forward, not into performance, but into presence. And that changes everything.